Haiku number one. If life was only eating soul food and fucking, I'd be good with that. I know that's not a traditional haiku. It's not about nature or seasons, but I grew up in the hood. There weren't a lot of trees outside my door, so I write what I know. But I've always loved that 575 syllabic structure. It's cool to read, it's fun and challenging to write, so I do. This piece came to me after a dream I had, which came after a day I had, one like many Black men have had. It was the day when I was reminded that my skin often puts me behind the eight ball, and I have to make a fancy trick shot to have any chance in the game. In the dream, I was talking to a Black woman who I had just met. I began telling her about my day, about how the police slowly followed me in their car as I walked around a white area of town, and how I had to play it cool and act like the thoughts that they could shoot me down in cold blood and get away with it didn't cross my mind. I told her how the project I was working my butt off for had been going smoothly until the people I was working for decided that our agreement meant very little once a white artist wanted my space. So the woman told me about her day. She told me how she stood out as the only Black woman in the room at her job, but somehow her ideas were all still ignored until they were later repeated by a man and then praised. She told me that she felt sexualized by every image she saw of herself in the media that day, and then powerless to control her own body. Then she told me that she feared for me too. We looked at each other, lost for answers, and she hollered out, "Fuck, I wish I had some macaroni and cheese and candied sweet potatoes right now." I said, "Yeah, I could go for some collard greens and cornbread myself." We laughed. We didn't even mention chicken, she noted, right before I woke up and wrote that haiku, or whatever you want to call it. Most know me as a storyteller, but before I ever wrote my first piece of long fiction, I wrote poetry. I started very young, writing poems for my mother when I was 6 years old. They were simple pieces along the lines of roses are red, violets are blue. Still, my mother would hold on to my poems and short stories for years. She thought I was some sort of prodigy, as all parents think of their kids. Perhaps we all want to believe that something extraordinary came from us. I was an engineering major in college, though I never wanted to be an engineer. After my first year, I joined a writing group, the Haraka Writers. Then I joined a theater group, the New Directional Players. I found my way by joining those groups. In fact, I believe that saved me. It's not because engineering was so bad. I was on the dean's list in engineering. It's because I went to school in the middle of Indiana, and I was not exactly welcome there. I was told more than once that I was only there because of affirmative action. But again, I was on the dean's list in engineering. For the first time in my life, I felt hatred in my heart for a group of people, and it was killing me. Haiku number two. I never walked on 40 acres with a mule, but my scowl shocks you. The first week of school, there was a KKK rally in town, and skinheads were handing out flyers to freshmen. The word nigger could be found written on library shelves and bathroom walls throughout campus. It could be heard flying through the air at big events where the origin of the word could be confused by the crowd. And it was painted on the side of the Black Cultural Center, a small deteriorating building on the edge of campus, the BCC, the only building on campus that had not been cleared of asbestos by the school. The building that became my second home. But it was not just because the BCC housed the Haraka Writers and the New Directional Players that I was there more than I was in class. It was because the library at the BCC had books that I couldn't find anywhere else on campus, books that I didn't know existed, and I loved books. I was introduced to Black writers whose names sounded familiar, but whose words I had never read. I was introduced to historical Black heroes and Black geniuses who I didn't know existed. I would go to the BCC every day after my classes. I would pick up a book, and I would read and read and read. And as I learned the truth about the past, I understood more about myself in the present, and the hateful feelings started to fade. Looking back, I think there were two reasons for that. One was that my love for self was growing, and I simply didn't have room inside for hatred. Besides that, I think that learning more about history helped me to understand the hatred toward me in a different context. The people who hated me knew nothing about me. They hated me for reasons that were really unreasonable. They were sick. That's what I realized. They were sick people, and I had started to catch their virus, but the books were my medicine. You know, to stop a sickness, the first thing you have to do is admit you're sick so you can seek out the right medication. And the medicine never works right away. When you go to the doctor, they don't give you one pill and tell you it's a cure. They give you medicine to take over a period of time, and they tell you to rest, to stop doing the things that cause the sickness, and to give the medicine time to work. I really do love books. I've read more than I can count, the biggest concentration of them being during my time in school. In parts of this country, most of the books that I read would be banned from schools, and perhaps soon from more than just schools. White people in position of powers are banning books using phrases most people don't understand, like critical race theory, to keep my children from reading. While they can no longer keep them from scanning their eyes over symbols and understanding words, they want to keep them from reading the world and why it is, from reading what's around them and how it got there, from reading who they are. They seem to think that if my children have self-love, their children can't love themselves. And that's just wrong. We've been keeping the truth hidden for generations. Has it helped you to love yourself? I can tell you from experience that the sickness of hatred spreads like a virus, and the only antibody that defeats it is love. And the medicine that helped me strengthen my immune system was truth through reading. Ignorance feeds the virus of hatred, and it makes people do some really sick things, like horrendous acts of violence, or like electing an ignorant failure to the highest office, and then making excuses for his acts of treason because he gave them permission to blame brown people for all of their woes. I realize that there are those who want to keep us all sick because they have become powerful through our weakness. So they ban books to keep your children and my children ignorant. What they don't seem to understand is that if this virus continues to spread, this whole experiment will be a piece of paper reaching 451 degrees Fahrenheit, and all of our children will burn. Both of my sons were early readers. They love books too, especially my youngest son. My oldest son really loves math, and he's very good at it. I think they're both prodigies. My oldest son and I have talked about this critical race theory thing. He doesn't quite understand what's going on. He's very logical, and this bullshit is not. But when I told him that they were banning math books in some places, that hurt his math-loving heart. Why would they ban math books? What can I say? Apparently, if a word problem mentions anything that is specific to my life or culture, it is unacceptable to some. I have no explanation beyond that because all we've been given are wrong answers, and they are afraid to show their work. But as convoluted as their answers may be, the desired result is clear. Haiku number 3. My school banned math books. They use a new equation. They subtracted me. Thank you.
Amazing. Amazing.